Hey everyone, welcome back to my round 5 recap from the Madrid Chess Festival. As you can probably see, I'm not in Madrid, and it was actually after this game that I decided to stop recording recaps and just focus on getting rest and prepping between each game. So I'm back in St. Louis and yeah, working through the rest of my recap videos. And before we get into the game, I do want to take care of a few housekeeping items. I was growing a beard for a couple weeks, but I decided to shave against the desires of a lot of people in the YouTube comments. But I'm back in St. Louis and it's really hot here and it was getting uncomfortable and really itchy. And yeah, this is a better approach for the summertime. So I might bring the beard back when the weather gets colder, but for now, I'm just more comfortable with a clean shaven face. So a few other things I want to mention. I do want to announce my upcoming tournaments because they are open to everyone. And if you are maybe wanting to plan a last minute summer chess vacation, I'll leave a few links below to the events that are coming up for me. One is Biel, the Biel Chess Festival in Switzerland in July, and the other is in Trondheim, Norway. It's a Lewis Chess Legends event from, I think it's August 6th through the 14th. And yeah, both events seem really nice and great locations. I'll leave more info below. I'll probably mention more detail in upcoming videos. And the last thing I want to mention is it's still June and there's still the Chessmood promotion. If you want to get free access to chessmood.com, a massive video library of over 500 hours worth of very high quality courses. Link will be below. Thanks everyone who has signed up and offered great feedback. I use them a lot in preparation for my tournament in Spain and just great website overall. So let's get into my round 5 recap. This game, I was playing Jose Rafael Gascon del Nogal. I think originally from Venezuela, but I believe he's living in Spain. And he's Grandmaster, rated just below 2,500. And I've known him actually for a few years. We actually roomed together at a tournament in 2018 in Benasque. And in that tournament, he actually clinched his Grandmaster title. So this is our first time facing over the board. And I knew that he's probably one of the strongest players in my section, and I had the black pieces. So the game began with knight to f3. I played pawn d5, and he played pawn to g3. Now, I do want to confess that in the couple hours leading up before this game, I was mainly preparing pawn e4 on move 1. He's historically an e4 player, and I was preparing some theoretical Sicilian variations. And about 15 minutes before the game began, I realized that he hadn't played e4 in this tournament. And his 2 games in this tournament, one was knight f3, and the other game was d4 on move 1. So I did some last minute prep, and I decided that if we got to this position, I would play a move that I've never played before. And that move is bishop to g4. And if we just turn on the master's database, bishop g4, it's one of the playable moves in this position for black. But for the last maybe 10 to 15, maybe even 20 years, basically my whole serious chess career, I've mainly played knight f6, bishop g2, and e6. I've almost never played the lines where I developed the bishop to g4 so early. But the reason why I went for this line specifically, I guess there's a couple of reasons. For one, I didn't want to walk into any sort of specific prep my opponent could do for me. And the other reason was about a month before the tournament, I stumbled upon the YouTube channel of Grandmaster Boris Avruk, a very strong player, very renowned trainer and chess author. And he has a short video on YouTube dedicated to talking about this line, which he calls the Blue Bomb variation, named for Grandmaster Blue Bomb, who has used this line with decent success in recent years. And it's, I think, a more trendy line recently. After bishop g2, the point is to play e6, and black delays putting the knight here. And it's just a kind of different approach for black in this opening where it kind of resembles a reverse Trompowsky. And it was nice to get my opponent out of any sort of pregame preparation from early on. And even though I don't have so much experience in this line myself, I did review some of the lines that Avrik mentions in his video. And I'll leave that video below if you want to check that out. So the game continues from here. Pawn c4, pawn c6. I'm playing somewhat of a semi-Slav setup, but my bishop is developed. And then my opponent castles. During the game, I was actually briefly thinking about if my opponent takes on d5, it's very possible for black to blunder here. And black does have to be careful which pawn to take back with, because if black takes with a c pawn, which has happened 24 games in Lichess, then white is winning after queen a4, check, and attacking the bishop. So if my opponent were to take on d5, I think I was just going to take on f3 first, takes, takes, and then takes, and not blunder a piece. And even though black concedes the bishop pair, it's pretty easy development from here. I think the engine will say that it's, just equal here. But that didn't happen. My opponent left the tension in the center. He castled. I played knight f6. He played queen to b3. And this is a very typical plan in these sort of early openings where the bishop is no longer on c8, so the pawn's not defended, and white is putting immediate pressure against the b7 pawn. And here I respond with queen to b6. This is one of the most standard ways of defending the pawn. And I really don't mind if white takes. This is usually just a good transformation. Double pawns are not at all weak, and it's nice having the half-open a-file as black. So my opponent left the tension between the queens. He played pawn to d3. I played knight b d7, and then he plays bishop to e3. So he's actually trying to provoke me to take on b3 so he can get the half-open a-file for his rook. And in this position, I had vaguely remembered looking at this a few weeks before the tournament. And I had remembered the idea to play bishop c5, to leave my queen on b6, develop my final minor piece, and just offer the trade of darks for bishops. And this was pretty much the extent of my opening preparation. And I thought this position is just very solid for black. I have nice harmony. Everything is pretty much developed, and I'm ready to castle next move. So going forward from here, my opponent takes. I take back with knights, attacking the queen. And my opponent plays queen to c2, not trading on b6. During the game, I was fantasizing that if we get to this position and my opponent's careless, let's say he plays a move like h3, looks very natural. Now it's black to move and win material. This is a nice tactical puzzle. If you want to pause the video, try and find the way black can basically be winning here. Black can take on f3, and after bishop takes f3, there's a nice idea to use the a-file, use the pin against this pawn, and the move is knight to b3, essentially trapping the rook. So, of course, my opponent did not go into that. He avoided the queen trade. And with queen c2, he gets out of the way of the b-pawn. There might be ideas for white to play b4 eventually to kick away my knights. So from here, I castle kingside. He plays knight b d2, and I play pawn to a5. This is really just a natural improving move, very typical move for these sort of structures, ensuring that white is not going to play b4 anytime soon. And there's even cases where black can play a4, like if white plays a3 to try and eventually prepare pawn b4, then I can play a4, essentially fixing the pawns on the queen side. And then if white ever moves the b pawn, I can take en passant. So yeah, he didn't play a3. He instead plays rook to c1, creating the battery on the c file. And now he's threatening to take with the discovered attack against my knight. So I retreat to d7, and then he plays pawn to b3. And yeah, from this position, both sides are just really, really solid. Neither of us really have any obvious weaknesses, and we're both kind of doing our own thing. From here, I thought a useful move is to play rook to e8, and I played this relatively quickly. I was not spending too much time off my clock. And the point of this move is to potentially prepare pawn e5. And he took a long think here before playing e3. which is maybe just kind of a waiting move, putting the ball back in my court. And I decide to expand in the center with pawn e5. And now I have two nice looking center pawns controlling more space. Not every day that you can get this sort of setup as black. But this is sometimes a double-edged sword, because even though the pawns control space, they could be potential targets. So here my opponent took on d5, and then I took a long think here deciding what to take back with. Because if I take with a knight on d5, then this resembles a reverse open Sicilian structure, which I thought would be easier to play for white. White has its tempo move knight c4, hitting the queen, pressuring this pawn. And if I play queen c7, then yeah, it seems like white's position is very solid, like a3 to eventually prepare b4, or queen b2 to attack the pawn on e5. And I didn't quite want to go into this structure, so I took back with the c-pawn. Now, the downside of this move is it does allow the potential for white to invade with queen to c7. But my opponent didn't play that right away. Instead, he played pawn to h3, putting the question to my bishop. I retreated to f5. And then my opponent played a move which I didn't really anticipate, this move pawn to g4. And when he played this move, I began realizing that I might be under a bit of pressure, because if I retreat the bishop either to g6 or e6, then pawn g5 can come, and my knight is pretty limited on squares. I was calculating lines like bishop g6, pawn g5, I would have to move to h5 with a knight, and then, yeah, my knight's out of play, and there's ideas of queen c7, and it seemed like there were a lot of cases where white could be just taking over the game, grabbing initiative, using the c-file, and yeah, my center looks nice, but I don't think it's really that impressive. d5 could be an eventual target. Yeah, knight h4 is in the air. So after he played pawn to g4, I took my time, and instead of just debating between bishop e6 or bishop g6, I discovered that there's a third candidate move in the position. And it probably took me a few minutes to realize that I have a third option rather than retreating the bishop, is actually to move forward with my bishop and take the pawn on d3. And this is a way more forcing and concrete variation. The point being is that after bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, I win back the piece with pawn e4, forking the queen and the knight. And after a pretty long think, I decided to go for this. Even though I concede my last bishop in the position, I thought this just led to an easier position to understand and to play for black. Now he plays queen d4, offering the queen trade. I take on f3, he takes on b6, I take on b6, and he takes on f3 with a knight. And yeah, I saw this position coming from when I played bishop takes d3. And the structure is transformed pretty substantially. Like, queens are off the board. I'm left with an isolated pawn on d5. So white should be objectively better here. But I just thought that the play is like pretty easy for black. I start with rook to c8, offering the trade of rooks on the c-file. And my simple plan was just to walk my king to the center, support the pawn. And I thought that my pawn should have enough defenders, at least as many defenders as white can have attackers. And yeah, going forward from here, my opponent really wasn't able to put much pressure on me. He played the move knight d4, which looks very natural, unleashing the bishop and blockading the pawn. I played king f8, getting ready to enter the center with my king. And then he played this move pawn f3. And I think this move was just not the best way to fight for the advantage. I mean, his idea is to eventually play king f2, improve his king, but f3 just blocks a bishop and just lessens the pressure against the d5 pawn. And I did analyze this game a little bit with Engine, and Engine recommends the move pawn to g5 here, which I think makes a lot more sense in the position. Even though maybe white is overextending a bit, the point is to chase the knight away from f6. Let's say I move back to d7, then white can employ a very strong maneuver, knight e2, aiming to go to f4 and then put maximum pressure against the pawn on d5. And there's cases where if the knight lands on f4, the rook lands on d1, then my pawn could actually be very difficult to defend. And I think if I was playing like a stronger grandmaster, like let's say I was playing Magnus Carlsen from this position, he would probably find g5 and probably end up grinding me down. It'd be very difficult to survive as black. But thankfully, my opponent did not put maximum pressure. He played f3. And next three moves, I think, were very simple. We traded rooks. I offered another rook trade. He avoided the trade. I played the move pawn to g6. I didn't play king e7 immediately because knight f5 is a bit unpleasant. So g6 was prophylaxis against knight f5. And after bishop f1, king e7, king f2, knight fd7, I was just achieving my optimal setup. Got my knight to c5. The idea is to play knight e6, offer the trade of knights. And after h4, knight e6, bishop d3, I played knight d7. And there was a 30-move no-draw rule where you can't offer a draw before move 30 in this tournament. But we had reached move 30, and I had offered a draw in this position because I thought the position was just equal at this point. And during the game, I was actually feeling a little bit not so well. It was really hot in the playing hall. I did annotate some of my thoughts here that, yeah, if you want to see all my annotations, I'll leave a link below to this Laclede Chess study. But basically, yeah, I wasn't feeling that great. I was tired. This was the second game of the day, and it was really hot in the playing hall too. And I just wanted to get out of there. And yeah, thankfully, my opponent, after a few minutes of thinking, accepted the draw. And yeah, the game ended peacefully. So I think this game, like, even though maybe it wasn't the most exciting game, there were definitely some interesting moments. And I think I was thankful to hold on to what was probably a worse position at some points. Looking back, if we go back to this critical moment when my opponent played g4, even though bishop takes d3 was not the best move according to the engine, it was somewhat of a practical decision to enter a position that was just easier to play for my side. So I don't think I have too many regrets in this game. One takeaway from this game, though, is I should probably be a bit more prepared if I'm going to play a surprise in the opening, because basically what happened is we got to a structure that I maybe mishandled a little bit. And there was a moment somewhere around here where I probably could have gone a better type of structure. I think it was here. Instead of what I played in the game castling, there was a chance to take on f3. After bishop takes f3, play d4, and grab the space advantage, get more of a reverse Benoni structure. So maybe it's worth analyzing this line a bit more in depth so I'm better prepared next time. But yeah, that was a game. If you want to analyze further, link will be below to the Laclede Chess study. If you have questions, do leave them below. Thanks everyone for your support, and stay tuned for the next recap. I'll see you guys soon.